Greetings to all. I hope you all are doing well. So, what is the intention today? Well, the intention is to explore what Buddha said. But there is a deeper investigation. There is a deeper intent, which is to cultivate the tenderness of the heart. Because very often, when we talk about concepts, there is a tendency of the mind to get entangled into concepts, which takes us away from the centeredness of the heart, from the groundedness of the heart. Loving kindness, or metta, as the Buddha said, is the intention today. The intention is not to compare Advaita with Buddhism, or not to claim superiority or inferiority of one system over another. It is not a comparison. We are just exploring through concepts, and concepts are not right or wrong. Concepts are just a series of presentations. Take the concept and see how you can apply it in your life. If it brings you peace by cultivating the tenderness of the heart, that concept becomes your truth. And if not, that concept can be discarded. I'm not an expert on Buddhism. I don't know much about Buddhism. What I'm going to talk today is basically what Ramesh Balsekar reflected on the subject. And I'm going to build on his interpretation. You see, when I came across Buddha's message for the first time, I came to know about his first discourse that he got after enlightenment. And the discourse is the first one and is known as Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which is turning the wheel of truth in motion, which has four pronouncements, four noble truths. I'm not qualified to go into details of each one, but for me, the first noble truth was enough to understand what Buddha was implying. The first noble truth was my first insight before I ever knew anything about Advaita, Buddhism, or any of the modern philosophies. My first insight, as I have mentioned in previous satsangs also, was that happiness comes attached with unhappiness, which to me is the perfect understanding of the first noble truth. Samsara is dukkha. Samsara is the beginningless and the endless cycle of mundane life, mundane existence, birth, death, and rebirth. And Buddha says that mundane existence is dukkha. Dukkha, which is translated in the English language as suffering, but that's not the accurate description. It is much more than the suffering. It is the irritation, the unsatisfactoriness, the minor disappointments, the bitterness. So, the first noble truth for me had a huge impact. That insight brought about a series of investigation which proceeded further. Now, in the subsequent truths, he talks about the cause of the suffering, the cessation of the suffering, and then the middle path. But that is beyond the scope of our discussion here because it is vast. So let's understand what the Buddha was trying to tell us. But before that, we must understand that to follow a spiritual path, there are never ideal conditions. If we are waiting for the ideal conditions, things to fall in place, and then do the explorations, then it's never going to happen. I remember meeting one of my uncles many years back. And I told him that certain changes are taking place in my life and I am exploring spirituality. And he looked at me and he said, "You're too young to explore spirituality." And he said that I also plan to do that, but I'm going to do that after my retirement. And I think he never did. It never happened for him because even after retirement, he got some position somewhere and it kept happening for him, something or the other. So there are never ideal conditions. Let me get out of a relationship or let me, um, settle my finances and then I'm going to pursue spirituality. No, all this investigation has to be done when we are in the thick of the world and phenomenality as it is happening. Sometimes we say that first I must do practices and quiet my mind, and once I'm in that spot, then I will make the investigations. No, it has to be done right now, right here. And the beautiful thing is that it doesn't require extra time. It can be done spontaneously anytime, any place, by examining the flow of life. So, here is what Buddha says, and I'm going to read this. The way of the teacher requires every man to free himself from the illusion of the self, to cleanse his heart, to give up his thirst for pleasure, and lead a life of righteousness. And whatever men do, whether they remain in the world as artisans, merchants, and officers of the king, or retire from the world and devote themselves to a life of religious meditation, Let them put their whole heart into their task. Let them be diligent and energetic. And if they are like the lotus, which, although it grows in the water, yet remains untouched by the water, if they struggle in life without cherishing envy or hatred, if they live in the world not a life of self but a life of truth, then surely joy, peace, and bliss will dwell in their minds. So there's never going to be an ideal situation. There's always going to be mud. There's always going to be challenges. Doesn't mean that one has to put oneself in a difficult situation. But if life flows, if things come, the investigation has to be made right there. Sabe anicca dukkha. All conditioned arising, which are impermanent, lead to suffering. The word anicca means impermanent. And what is impermanent? The conditioned arising. The core idea is that things are in a constant state of flux, constantly changing. No happening happens independently on its own. There are conditions which bring about a phenomena. And when those conditions cease, it undergoes a change. For example, a flame. When the conditions are right, with the right mix of gases and the oxygen, the flame is lit and it continues to give light. But when those conditions are changed, the flame disappears. So there is this constant change that is happening, which is bringing about all this phenomena. And it is when we start believing the impermanent to be permanent that we experience suffering. It is not the mere identification which causes suffering, it is the clinging, it is the grasping which causes suffering. So, first, let's talk about the natural reaction of the biological organism versus the ego. Once a Swami came to meet Ramesh and they had a discussion, which is noted in his book Advaita and the Buddha. And there was an interesting discussion about reactivity, reactions. Now, we all are familiar with this because in our daily life, we react. So the Swamiji's idea was that the Buddhism says once the understanding happens, the reaction does not happen. And he puts it in this way, which I'm going to read out so that it's more clear as to what he said. So he said, an ordinary person feels pain and an enlightened person feels pain. So, what is the difference between them? And the Buddha, so he's continuing the dialogue and he says, the Buddha says, when an ordinary person feels pain, he then laments and beats his breast and falls into despair. He is like a man who, on being shot with one arrow, is then shot with the second arrow. But the enlightened person, on feeling pain, does not lament and cry and beat his breasts. He is like a man, on being shot with one arrow, is not shot with the second arrow. So Ramesh inquired, so that means he has control. And Swamiji says, a Buddhist would say there is no reaction. He sees it as an illusion or as not real, and therefore, how could fear arise? Now, to which Ramesh replied, and he said that fear will still arise even in the enlightened man. The reaction will also happen in the enlightened man. And he gives example of the Christ. He says, when Christ was on the cross, he cried out, why hast thou forsaken me? When Ramakrishna Paramhansa was suffering with cancer, he cried out to Mother, Goddess Kali. Even when Nisargadatta Maharaj was experiencing the pain when he had cancer, said that there is great pain. And the same was said by Ramana Maharishi also. But he says that that is the natural reaction of the biological organism. It is not the ego. To expect that one will never have a reaction is not possible because that's not how life is designed. So when a reaction happens, one must have compassion for oneself, first of all, and know that where that reaction is coming from. The reaction in the moment is not the problem. The problem is the thinking that proceeds. In the case of a sage or an enlightened person, that thinking does not happen. Why did I have a reaction? The sense of guilt perpetuating in horizontal time. Why did I do this? The sage does not have the concept of doership, while a common man lives with the sense that I am the doer. And that is why this thinking constantly happens in the case of an quote unquote ordinary man. Do remember that we are only conceptualizing right now. That's why we are creating this distinction between an ordinary man and an enlightened person. It's only conceptualization. When the reactions are very frequent, that is an indication that the thinking mind is activated. In the case of a sage, a reaction may happen, but its frequency is not very high in the sense that sage does not act compulsively. But once in a while, he or she may react. And when that happens, they do not beat themselves or cry because they know that it's not something they did. Now, for the reaction, they may apologize or do whatever is required in a given moment. That comes out of compassion. So it is not what happens in the moment that Buddha is concerned with. Buddha is concerned with the constant stream of thinking that is bringing about this disruption or these conditions which are causing restlessness. And that's what he's addressing. So he gives a concept to explain this. And he calls it Panchupadana Khanda Dukkha. Panch means five. Khanda means heaps or aggregates. These five components are at play, which are giving rise to this phenomenon. And they're constantly changing. They're dynamic entities. So he starts with the first, which is rupa, or the material, something that you can touch, have contact with, solid or liquid material. Then he comes to the second one, which is Vedana, which can also be said to be feeling or sensation. So after the contact, there is a sensation, pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, or neutral sensation. Beyond that is the perception or sanya. Now those mental impressions are stored. For example, let's say somebody in a car honking behind us. First contact happens, sensation, feelings, pleasant or unpleasant. But at this stage, At the stage of feeling, we are not talking about emotions. We're just focusing on the sensation, which is giving rise to perception. So when the honking happens repeatedly, the next time, that is when it is interpreted. And this is where the mindfulness arises, which is also a mental formation. Beyond perception is sankhara, or the mental formations which are giving rise to actions. This is where the karma is initiated. So there are certain motivations which gives rise to an intention. And those intention gives rise to actions. Now the actions can be wholesome or unwholesome. Now Buddha identifies more than 50 actions, or let's say 50 mental formations, which can be wholesome, unwholesome, or neutral. But again, that's beyond the scope of our discussion. So we're just going to keep it simple and just call them wholesome or unwholesome. So wholesome actions produce wholesome fruit, and unwholesome action produce unwholesome fruit. So somebody blowing a horn gives rise to irritation, vedana, sanya. And then there is a mental formation, taking an action now. Now, if at that stage, the mental formation of mindfulness comes into play, then something wonderful happens. And the Buddhist teacher Joseph Goldstein, he calls it a party of the wholesome mental formations. The moment mindfulness comes into the picture. So what you may do as a result is pay attention to the sensation and just either move your car, let the person go by, or if the mindfulness is not there, a reaction may happen, which may bear consequences. So beyond these mental formations is the vijnana, the fifth aggregate, which is consciousness. Now, consciousness again is of different types. Uh, Consciousness of sight, sound, based on the senses, taste, touch, smell. But again, the reference is to the quality. The consciousness may be different for different inputs. Input could be an object of sight, or an object of smell, or an object of taste. But the underlying quality of knowingness is the same. So, what the Buddha said is that this consciousness is also a conditioned arising. It comes and goes, moment to moment. In fact, it is said that in a blink of an eye, there are billions of arisings of this consciousness, as it happens so quickly. So, what is the catch? Why do we discuss these five aggregates? What are they pointing to? If you notice, the last one, vijnana or consciousness, is the observation of what precedes that. All the mental formations as they are taking place. And as one abides in this quality of consciousness, where there is total attention, to the object, the consciousness gets purified. And this purification leads to insight. And what is that insight? The insight in that is Buddha's core teaching of the non self, that there is no separate I that is experiencing anything. It is an arising that comes paired with the object of experience. And as one abides in this consciousness, in this restfulness, as it purifies with the power of mindfulness, one begins to see this more and more. The illusion of a separate entity, a separate experiencer. And what happens with that realization? The clinging begins to disappear. And what happens when the clinging begins to disappear? The suffering disappears. Pain is still there. As the Swami mentioned, the first arrow, the pain, the life, heartbreak, death, disease, decay, old age, loss of life, loss of loved ones, loss of property, loss of material, all that happens. First arrow, no escape. But second arrow, why me? Why is God so indifferent to me? All that dialogue begins to disappear. So as that dialogue begins to disappear, as this separateness begins to dissolve, what naturally arises is the tenderness of the heart, the peace. And that is what the seeker is always looking for. Deep, deep down, that is the only search. Because any state, no matter how blissful, is a conditioned arising. So anything that is conditioned is impermanent, anicca. It will come, it will play, and then it will disappear. So holding on, clinging, attaching to that which disappears will bring suffering. I will read a passage which says, paradoxical though it may seem, there is a path to walk on. There is walking being done, but there is no traveler. There are deeds being done, but there is no doer. There is a blowing of the air, but there is no wind that does the blowing. The thought of self is an error, and all existences are as hollow as the plantain tree and as empty as twirling water bubbles. Therefore, as there is no self, there is no transmigration of a self, but there are deeds and the continued effect of deeds. Buddha. Things are happening, but there's no one in charge. The agency which shows up, thinking that it is in charge, is the illusion. So, with this process, when we constantly observe how, when we come in contact with different objects, doesn't matter whether they are material or subtle or psychological, how they are giving rise to these mental formations, which are leading to wholesome or unwholesome actions. This process of simply seeing and going through it itself begins to refine consciousness or brings it back to its most natural state. Think of it like this. This may not be a very good analogy, but I think it will explain the point. The wave in the sea tries to rise high. It tries to touch the sky. It thinks that the more it becomes big in amplitude, the more stronger it will be. But what it forgets is the source from where it is arising. That source is way bigger than the sky it is trying to touch. So the ultimate strength is not in reaching for the skies. The ultimate strength is fulfilling its destiny, which is to merge with the ocean. The more this wave resists the ocean, the more it experiences pain and suffering. Our reactions, our irritations, anger, resentment, all these things propagating in horizontal time creates suffering, are the part of this wave trying to strengthen itself, trying to reach for the sky in the hope that that will bring happiness. The wave forgets that it doesn't have to do anything to be happy. In fact, the very doing is creating more and more suffering. Because living with the sense of personal doership is suffering. It strengthens the sense of the separation. But when this consciousness is refined, when the mindfulness is there, most of the actions that happen are spontaneous. They are wholesome. That means they arise out of wholeness. They do not arise out of belief and limitation. I don't see any difference between what the Buddha called as the unconditioned and what the non dualists call as the nominant. For me, they're one and the same. I know this is controversial and there are debates around it, but for me, there is no difference. You can call it Atman, you can call it Anatman, you can call it Anatta, you can call it pure consciousness, nominant, you can give it any name that you want, but they are pointing to one and the same truth. And this is the truth that Buddha spoke. Now, see how this plays out so beautifully in life. all the practices are beautiful, but the best practice is life itself, the flow of life and its examination, because it gives you moment to moment opportunity to see what's going on in your own mind. This is where the master said, be concerned with yourself. The moment your focus goes outwards to another object, person, thing, situation, that is coming from a belief in one's limitation. That is not coming out from wholeness. The actions that come out of wholeness are not concerned with the result, with the fruit. And that is a core message of Bhagavad Gita also. Karmanyavadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You have no right over what the fruit bears. All you can do is simply act. Act in the moment, whatever situation comes across. So when those actions come out of presence, that means without the sense of personal doership, then it doesn't matter what the result is. And Ramesh put it very beautifully when he said, if I'm not the doer, this is the final question, which every seeker asks. At the cusp of understanding, it's the final confusion. And this is perhaps one of the most challenging mental state one experiences before the insight happens, is that if I am not the doer of my actions, who is this me? Who is this me? And that is when the surrender happens. It is not that the me surrenders, but surrender happens. That is impersonal. And that is what I refer to as what the Buddha mentioned, his fifth aggregate, vijnana, the most refined consciousness. Which gives rise to tenderness of the heart. And it is purely for one's own self. It is not for the world. It is not to show other people that you are kind or compassionate. It is to recognize that your nature is kindness and compassionate. That is what you're made up of. All right. So I think we have gone deep into the concepts. Let's now take up some questions. So you can raise your hand and I will unmute you. Yes, Martina. Hello. Martina, are you muted? I cannot hear you. One second.
Okay, I think that did it.
Yes. Now I can hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Tell me.
Um,
Mm.
So when no one raises their hand, it's like I try not to jump in to be first because it's always wanting to raise my hand. Um, this is a share and a question. Everything that the Buddha is saying through you is answering my morning question. I get up early and I journal, and lately I have been getting up very grumpy, very unsettled. Restless was a good word that she used. The mind really, really restless. And what was unraveled here as you spoke was there is something going on in consciousness, but my mind is really blaming me. My mind is really jumping on me. My mind is thinking, thinking, but I'm not thinking. The mind is thinking. Does that make sense? Because there's this sense of schizophrenia in that, right? Okay, good. Okay, good. I knew I'd get the answer here. Okay, so the schizophrenia is I get up in the morning after a dream, a silly, silly dream, and I'm going, oh God, I'm thinking it's real. And so I'm in my mind going, oh my God, another day. I mean, how am I going to get through this day until I get to light my candles, get to the couch, pick up my pen and paper, and commit whatever is supposed to be happening. So today, all these words untangled what has been painful. Um, Thinking that I think believing the mind, being so immersed in the mind, I'm believing it, and then my body responds. So I have a response in my body, which is a real downer, um, because I am a heart-centered person. So when my heart is shut down, it's it's frightening to the psyche or something when it gets shut down. So an experience yesterday was going to a book signing that I was doing, and I had to really work to get myself there because I'm not much of a promoter. And it was lovely. And then there was a great amount of people in this area, not to my book signing, but just to the area. Music was going, and everyone was happy, and there was families and children and eating and all that. And I felt so disconnected from it. And then the minds came in and just did this downer on me. So that's what I'm experiencing now is this coming and going of the disappearance. I don't know how to say it, the disappearance of, it's not believing the mind because it just disappears. Something just disappears. Is that okay? Something disappears and I'm no longer believing the mind. Maybe is that the way I would put it. But the interim here is suffering. It's so clear with everything that you said today is the suffering is exactly when I start believing what the mind is telling me.
Right.
So if I'm not schizophrenic, then this is a good satsang.
So the mind says that something is lost, right? It is sort of grieving the loss of what has been lost.
Yes,
And this is what the Buddha said, that nothing is lost because nothing was really gained. So that
yes,
is the part of illusion, that we think that there is something that is in charge.
uh,
And when we see, when we notice this and the consciousness as it gets refined, we understand its ever changing nature. As the objects change, so does that consciousness change according to the concept of Buddhism. We are talking about the identified aspect of consciousness, which is the subject object relationship. So, as the object changes, the subject also changes according to that in this case. So, of course, Sometimes stress of the situation which is around you is bringing about certain conditioning, maybe uh, the stress of going to an event, you have to get ready, you have to get dressed. That stress could be there at play. And all these are all conditions, so again it is like the first arrow. So you cannot escape the first arrow, you have to go and
Okay.
do whatever you need to do.
Uh-huh.
It is
Yes.
so it is the first arrow cannot be helped. So if there is a physical issue, or if there is a psychological issue that is there, uh, one has to recognize that, okay, that is the first arrow. The problem is the second arrow, which is creating the suffering, because second arrow is the imagined arrow. It is the you know second arrow is the me. Why me? I shouldn't be
Yes.
like this shouldn't be happening,
Yes.
it should be this way, that way. So it continues, it keeps on going, it keeps on flowing that way. It gives the illusion that there is something here, which is valuable, which needs to be protected. And sometimes we get caught up in that. But then there is this realization that, okay, there is something here, but it's not very solid, it's not very
Yes.
concrete. So what am I going to do? you know so the mind actually starts grieving for that loss, you know but it wasn't there, it was never there. It's all just conditioning arising.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's perfect. And another piece just fell into place when you spoke about the object as I was watching that. It's because I'm not attached to all the objects like I used to be. I'm
Mm.
not attached
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
something, and that's causing the stress. The mind goes into stress because there's no object that it's clinging to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that one way I could say that correctly? I
Yes.
mean,
So
you,
so as far as I understand, yes, there is nothing to cling to. So the final question comes as to who, you know, if there's no clinging, if there's nothing, then who is this? What am I holding on to? Right?
a job.
Yes.
I have a job. What's my job?
Yes, exactly. What's my job? What's my purpose? What is here? What is gone? See, all these questions come up. So even, that is one of the stages which one goes through, where sometimes the absence of the self is also felt as a thought. But it is a thought, it's a conceptual thought. And sometimes the mind gets identified with it, and it gets a little bit entangled with it, that I must not lose, I must protect. But there's nothing
Yeah.
to protect, because there's nothing there in the first place. It's all, it's all these factors at play. Now, there is a deeper theory in Buddhism, which is the theory of dependent origination, which delineates 12 links. Now, that is, it's beyond the scope of our discussion right now. And plus, it's too extensive, so it cannot be covered. But it goes into some very subtle factors, some very, minor points as to how this happens. But, overall, my point is that we can go into all these conceptualizations, we can come up with the finest, we can go into the depths of what was said by Buddha, but ultimately, all this conceptualization will get us more and more entangled, which means it will strengthen the separative mind. And that's the whole idea, is to know that how that mind works, how it wants answers, how it is trying to, see, in your case, it is getting scared that something is lost, right? But that is mind only. So you see, it was never there in the first place.
Yeah.
So seeing that, understanding that, just with the refinement of consciousness, this process becomes clear that no, there's nothing which pains, there's nothing which hurts. In the moment, yes, in the situation, in a practical situation, yes. But beyond that, there is nothing lost.
Mm.
What is of value is here with you, is here and now arising is this.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, Martina.
That was a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi,
Thank you,
David.
Jagjot. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Are
Uh,
you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's noon here. I don't know what time it is in your Delhi.
No, I'm in Mohali, which is close to Delhi. So this is,
Okay.
I think it's already probably 9:30. Yeah.
At
Oh,
night?
yes, yes, 9:30 at
Ooh,
night. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, so interesting. The relativity of time, the illusion of time. I
Yeah.
want to reify it and say, no, this is noon. I see light in the rest. And the truth is, it's timeless. So appreciate that pointer. Yeah, did not know that about Ramesh, that book, Advaita and Buddha's and the Buddha.
Yes, Advaita and the Buddha. Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Thank you. I knew that there was resonance listening to you, and I mean, I have different groups that Advaita as well as I'm a practicing Buddhist, so I appreciate the deep, deep resonance. And that quote from the Buddha that you mentioned about the non-doer.
Yeah.
Where was that? Because I want to reference it. I want to.
Honestly, it's not, it's in the book. It's in this book, Advaita and the Buddha.
Okay.
And it's probably on, well, let me see.
No worries. I can find it. I'll
Well,
do a
yeah,
Google search.
it's on page 42 now. I'm sure this is Ramesh's interpretation. And, there's one quote which was always Ramesh's favorite quote. And it was something like, yeah, it was events happen, deeds are done, but there is no individual doer thereof.
Yeah.
And he said that that's quote from Buddha, but nobody could find it. So in the end,
Yeah.
he says, if you can't find it, just take it as a concept and see if it resonates with you or
Yeah.
not.
Well,
But then,
I just
but then somebody actually looked it up, and it was found in, in one of the sutras. And now I don't remember the name of the sutra or the, uh, you know, where exactly was it. But yes, somebody said that it is there.
And it's,
And
I mean, I'm saying this, authorship is irrelevant to me. It's a transmission, it's a timeless truth. I just before this talk listened to Longchenpa, the Dzogchen master, Tibetan, and it tracks with the quote from Ramesh, tracks with what he is teaching. You know, again, timeless awareness, uh, the empty ground of being. So yeah, again, it's resonant. So it's irrelevant to me whether the Buddha said it, the Buddha meant it, it came through. Like you said, all these teachings are just timeless wisdom. So thank you. My question though, because I've asked again, I practice Dzogchen, and it doesn't matter where the transmissions come, I'll receive. I was talking about, and I know the mind. I was listening to Martin, and uh, you know, is looking for some ground. So this notion of impermanence and the truth of impermanence, and the first noble truth as suffering, which is again attachment to things or turning away. I feel it deeply, uh, and I can rest in that timeless truth. Uh, and then that feels permanent to me. And I know the risk of again impermanence versus permanence. I want to ask you, this is not a discursive. I don't need to make it permanent. It's timeless. I get that. I feel that deeply. Maybe this is why Advaita speaks to me more, the nature of self as this timeless emptiness of being. Uh, it feels eternal, and there's something about this when I start to really move into the first noble truth, just the nature of suffering, as again eternal.
yes.
And I want to ask, is there a way out? I mean, it seems like there's no escape, as you said, and maybe there's the wisdom of no escape, which is to just feel it all. I mean, really, like you said, Ramakrishna wanted to turn to the mother to be released from this pain, and the pain was what is.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, Christ on the cross, in the Garden of Gethsemane, asking God to take away that trial. It is what it is. So there's a part of me that resonates with what you've said, the cosmic law, reality as it is, Vipassana. But then there's the ego. I guess I maybe have answered my question. There's no escape. There's no
Yes,
way out.
you've answered your
Uh,
question. Yes, but I'm going to build on that. Yes.
okay, okay. I mean, and I've spoken in here before about that fifth. Forget what how you framed it, but consciousness almost becoming aware of itself. I'm stuck in that loop, and even in my meditations, the Chekro practice and Dzogchen, I try to rest and relax, but the mind, the consciousness, witness, whatever it is, throws me back into this dialectic of samsara and the attachment, the aversion. I'm in it. And like with Martine, I mean, I can see it and then I want to do something
Mm.
to not see it. I want an antidote. I want freedom and liberation, even though I already intellectually understand that it's free. It's just timeless knowing. Uh, but I don't believe it. And that's the I saying it wants got knowledge. I see my trap and I'm laying the trap.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see the trap that I'm laying for myself.
Yes. Yes.
So I want your help to get me out of this trap, even though I can already see that I'll pull you into the quicksand with me.
You know, this is interesting because try to think of it like this. The one that is contemplating trying to get out of the trap, is that one separate from the trap?
Mm.
If you contemplate on that, I think, David, one of the most amazing things about all this is, we try to imagine life without suffering, and we see other people, and immediately there's a comparison in mind that they have got it. Why haven't I got it? So we are falling into the same trap of comparison. It happens. And I would say it is a grace of God that if you can see all of this happening, because you've been very honest about all of your conditioning, as it is arising. So what you're saying is, I can see it, but I don't believe it, right? That is very honest. But even if you can see it, that's a blessing, because majority of the people cannot even see it. Now you know the psychology, you've been, and you can see that ego syntonic thing which plays out with your patients. They cannot see it. There is just no chance. But sometimes for unexplained reasons there is a crack, and it just opens out. Now I don't know if you've come across people like that. I have come across where initially I would see no scope of change at all, unimagined. And then just one day, the heart would come out, the tears would come out, the joy would come out. And for unexplained reason, it's like nothing major happened. I just felt it, this intensity. I felt something breaking within me. And then I knew that it's happened and I don't need to do anything. So somewhere your mind is still contemplating a way out, and that is a trap. If I say there is no way out, the mud is never going to be separated from the lotus. The mud is going to be there. You have to accept the mud, and then you blossom,
Mm.
because the lotus remains unaffected. Not even a drop gets to the lotus. It is such an amazing scene. That understanding was so beautiful. He says, if you want to suffer, suffer like Buddha. This was said by uh, who was the Vietnamese monk, very famous
Thich
monk,
Nhat
Thich
Hanh.
Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat
Thich
Hanh.
Nhat Hanh. Yes, he said that. He's oh so beautiful. He said, if you want to suffer, it's just that you haven't suffered enough. You know, you know what I mean. I'm not talking about the suffering
Yeah.
that you invite from life. I'm talking about you've not attended to your core, and somehow you're getting scared that if I attend to my core, I may lose something. So all you can do is just investigate what is that I'm trying to save, That is the only investigation that one can do.
Well, I thank you for that, because it's a constant pointer from other teachers as well that love the mud too. I'm trying to clean the mud off. I'm trying to purify, get rid of. And even as you said that, I was like, okay, if I love the mud, I don't know. Am I afraid I'm going to identify with the mud? I'm a bit of a masochist. I was cultural Christian, raised Roman Catholic. Somebody also said to me, Dave, get off the cross. The resurrection's already been promised. And it's like, if I love the mud, do I run the risk of again just trapping myself in suffering, masochistic and or otherwise? But again, that's just a fear. I mean, I'm just so damn afraid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
I mean,
thank you.
no, resurrection is such a beautiful concept. Now, it is my concept, and it is not what, may resonate with the Christian community. But my concept is that, yes, Jesus cried out at the cross. He cried out. He said, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" That was the last cry. After that, it was finished. And then he came back again. Now, what that symbolizes to me is that the separate self or the ego died at the cross. It finished at the cross. And then what came out is the natural, is the most natural expression from the biological organism, which is inherently peaceful, living moment to moment, with total acceptance of what comes and goes. The concepts went away. All there was peace and bliss. That is what it symbolizes to me, you know. And so I don't feel that when this mud gets wiped out, there will be fear. The mud is the fear. The fear is the you. You is the belief in your limitation. And when it happens and you see that no, you're not this limited entity that is striving to become something or achieve something, and you will see the restfulness. You will just remain in that restfulness. You will experience life, as it happens. The pain, everything will happen the same way. But you never gained anything. The same thing I'm going to tell you what I said to Martina. You never gained anything. That's the misconception, that there is something here which needs purification. And you think that I can do something to purify this. But the more you're doing, you're finding is that it is strengthening the mind, because then the mind is coming up, will this work, will it not work? It is all just bringing up more and more thinking. So just witnessing this whole process, just watching this whole process is freedom in itself. It will lead to peace
Mm,
ultimately. There's nothing to be done as such. No hard practices. I mean, do the practices, do the meditations. They're good for the mind. But the deeper understanding is that it's all happening. It's all just
thank
happening.
you. Thank you, Guruji. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, David. Take care. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Vijendra.
Namaskar,
Namaskar ji.
Ram. Uh, this is my first time for your satsang, and apologies, I'm not on video. My camera is not working somehow.
Okay, no
Uh,
problem.
and I have today downloaded your book, The Serpent Energy. So, such a good coincidence that I'm talking to you.
Okay, okay.
I just want to understand few things, Jagjot. One is I've been doing practices since last, few years.
Mm-hmm.
The real change has happened by reading the book from a master called PJ Saher. It's Zen Yoga,
Okay.
and which eventually talks about the practice that you just now, told us, which is basically watching yourself in
Yes.
terms of whatever is arising in your being. So I used to get, angry, fearful, and lusty and whatnot. All of that has reduced to a very, very great extent just by watching your being and what is happening, and then trying to create a separateness, between whatever is arising and between, so-called you.
Yeah.
This is one. Now, all of this is leading to the tenderness of heart. I think this is the new thing that I learned from your side today.
Yeah.
So eventually, it's refining the consciousness towards kind of reaching to the tenderness of heart. This is what eventually you are trying to say. Till the
Yeah.
time it reaches, that means you might have arrived, or whatever you call it. Something will happen over there. Now, I have been doing all of this, and suddenly, my path has changed a little bit towards bhakti, Jagjot,
Mm-hmm.
where I kind of, go and listen to some of our Sufi songs or some bhakti songs, and I feel like crying, right? So I just go out towards like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the night in my society, listen to those songs, and then I keep on, crying for some time.
Yes.
Does that also lead to this refining of heart or tenderness of heart? Is it okay, or am I straying from my path? All those questions keeps on coming. So please clarify these doubts. Sure.
Yes. 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 It If the path has changed for you, then that is probably destined for you. Now it may come back. You will observe that while we try to distinguish between the three paths, the karma, bhakti, and jnana, but in essence they are not different. They are the same, because bhakti leads to jnana, and jnana leads to karma, and karma leads, and the other way around. They are all tied up. One cannot isolate. I mean, for example, I've seen people doing karma leading to tenderness of the heart, the
Mhm.
bhakti arising in them, because of that knowledge also arising in them. They're not separate paths. So if bhakti is happening, then probably your system has to go through that unique process. And if crying is happening, that is something amazing, because it is probably a lot of grief which comes out. We've got this wrong notion that we shouldn't cry, or that crying is somehow obstructing us from in our spiritual practice. I mean, as far as I have seen, all the Sufis, saints, sages, they have cried. They've cried their heart out. They have cried outside temples, outside mosques. They have emptied their heart out. And it is a phase that one experiences. I mean, Ramakrishna Paramhansa would cry out for mother, and Jesus would cry out for father. Jesus would cry out to God. So I don't see anything wrong in that, and I don't think you're straying. But yes, this may keep on changing. So follow the natural course, whatever, when you feel like exploring um, jnana, then go with that. And if right now you feel bhakti, and if you feel that is your devotion, then go with that. I don't think there's any problem with that.
Thank you so much. I'll be regular on your satsang, and thank you so much for your magnanimous presence.
Wish you all the best. Yes. So, hi, hello. How
Hi.
do, how do I how
Thank
do I call your name?
Ren.
Ren. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like the bird, but it's spelled different.
All right. Beautiful.
Ren.
Yes, Ren. Tell me.
Thank you so much. First of all, this is my first satsang with you, and I've really been enjoying your YouTube material. So thank you so much. I have a quick question based on some of the other comments I've heard today. Is it a fair interpretation to think of the lotus as consciousness above the water, and to think of the mud as all the objects, the impermanent objects?
Yes, you can interpret it that way. Although, if you go deeper, what you see is, uh, one second. Yes, what you see is that even the mud is revealed in consciousness. So, because the mud is known, life is known. For example, brings pain, it brings pleasure, both. And both cannot be decoupled. So the mud cannot be decoupled from the lotus. What seems as the defilements in the form of mud is actually what's nourishing the lotus. But if we see it from the from the separate perspective, it will seem as if it is the problem, as if the mud is responsible for, it is just something there extra which has no use. No, it is not like that. The perfect condition is that, that's why I said when Buddha, Thich Nhat Hanh said that if you want to suffer, suffer like Buddha, which means accept the mud, accept the life, and whatever it is bringing you. In that acceptance, the flowering will happen, not by trying to separate the defilements. Those patterns which govern us, which govern our behavior, will automatically subside as the awareness increases. The lotus remains untouched by the mud, which is true, but it is not separate from that. It is whole, it is one unit. That's the idea.
So, said differently, correct me if I'm wrong, the lotus will only flower if the mud is seen, if it's there.
Yes. Yes.
And I think what I've experienced, I tend to think in metaphors and analogies a lot. It helps me process the information. So I think the separative ego, what I have experienced almost all of my life, is the whiplash in the mud from pleasure to pain or suffering.
Yeah.
You know, it's trying to escape the suffering and stay in the pleasure, you know.
Yes.
And what I think I'm opening up to is the idea of having the capacity to hold both without clinging or trying or averting.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I've taken just a tiny nudge forward listening to you. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Nisargadatta Maharaj says in his book, I Am That, the river of my life flows between the banks of pain and pleasure. I cling to none. I remain unaffected. Which means the only way that detachment comes about is through acceptance of the cycle of pain and pleasure. It is understood that what we conceive as pleasure is actually is actually pain in the background. It's not pleasure, because sometimes we go for thrill, excitement, joy, juice, sexual encounters or anything. We think it is all bringing us pleasure, but that is actually pain in disguise. Now, again, it doesn't mean that we should deny life, but what it means is simply clinging that we're talking about here. Experiencing things in the moment is not a problem, but clinging to it, that I must avoid the suffering and just be with the pleasure and be in the feeling of goodness all the time, keeping the mind quiet all the time, will somehow flower me. No. What from what the master says, that you have to accept both. It is through the acceptance that the true detachment comes, that the true peace, the essence of the true peace is understood. And it is recognized that the mud is inseparable from the flower. It is one unit, it is not two.
And I guess I try to reconcile too the idea of Sat Chit Ananda, so which is bliss, that is arriving in that place where I guess pleasure and pain are experienced, but it's wrapped in bliss.
Well, yes, that is the confusion. It is not the bliss as we imagine. Sat, Chit, Ananda, these are three words. Sat is being. Sat means being, the unchanging. And Chit is consciousness. And Ananda is bliss. They're not three, they're one and the same thing. The three words describing one and the same thing, whose nature is bliss, which means exactly what has been discussed today, that the peace of nirvana or nibbana or liberation, whatever you want to call it, has to be found in samsara, in the flow of life, not separate from life, through the acceptance of the cycles of pain and pleasure. That is true bliss.
So just like the lotus flower is one, the lotus and the mud are one, Sat
Yes.
Chit Ananda is one.
Is one. It's all one. Yeah.
Thank you.
That is okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So I think we can conclude for today. Thank you so much for joining, and I wish you a great weekend. Take care. Peace to all.